ex told our kids I abandoned them for a new man. At my daughter's graduation, she read her speech directly to me and said, "I found your letters, all 400 of them. He never gave me one." There is a specific kind of silence that fills an auditorium when something true and enormous is said out loud into a microphone in front of 400 people. It is not the silence of discomfort. It is not the silence of confusion. It is the silence of recognition, the held breath of a room that understands all at once that they are witnessing something that cannot be taken back. My daughter Lily was standing at the podium in her cap and gown, her dark hair pinned back the way she always wore it for important things, the way I used to pin it when she was small and sitting still long enough to let me. She was 22 years old. She was the valedictorian of her graduating class at the University of Tennessee, and she was looking directly at me, not at the crowd, not at her notes, directly at me, in a way that made my breath stop somewhere in my chest. "I found your letters," she said, "all 400 of them. He never gave me one." The room went completely quiet. My name is Diane Callahan. I am 48 years old, and I have been, depending on who you asked and when you asked them, a mother, an abandoner, a woman who chose a man over her children, a cautionary tale, a ghost. The version of me that existed in my children's house for the 11 years after my divorce was none of those things, but it was the only version they knew until last spring, until a cardboard box in an attic, until a graduation speech that rewrote in 4 minutes and 30 seconds everything my daughter believed about the first decade of her life. I should start at the beginning. I usually do not tell this story, not because it is too painful, though it is, but because for a long time I was not sure anyone would believe it. I was not sure I fully believed it myself, that a person could do what Douglas did, systematically, quietly, over years, and leave no visible seam. That a man could be the kind of father who coached Little League and showed up to school plays and remembered every teacher's name, and also be the kind of man who intercepted 400 letters and told 2 children their mother had forgotten them. But I am getting ahead of myself. Douglas Callahan and I met when I was 23 in Knoxville, at a mutual friend's barbecue on a July afternoon that smelled like charcoal and cut grass. He was funny in that easy, immediate way that feels like chemistry but is sometimes just performance. He was attentive. He asked questions and then remembered the answers, which is a thing I have since learned to be more careful about. We dated for 2 years, got married in a ceremony my mother cried through, and had our first child, Lily, before I was 27. Our son James came 2 years after that. For a while things were fine, or they seemed fine. The gap between those two things is something I have spent a lot of years sitting with. Douglas was a good provider and a present father and almost never openly unkind, which is a combination that makes it very difficult to articulate why a marriage feels wrong. It just did. A low-frequency wrongness, like a sound you cannot locate, that I kept explaining away because I had no language for it and no evidence to point to. The wrong thing, I eventually understood, was control. Not the dramatic kind, not the kind with locked doors and raised voices, the quiet kind, the kind that operates through logistics. Douglas managed our finances, which seemed reasonable because he was better with numbers. Douglas handled the school communications, which seemed reasonable because he worked from home. Douglas decided where we vacationed, what we drove, which neighborhood we lived in, and what we did on Sundays. All of it reasonable, all of it explained, none of it ever quite feeling like mine. When I finally asked for a divorce, Lily was 9 and James was 7. Douglas did not fight it, which surprised me. He was calm and reasonable in the attorney's office, organized about the paperwork, cooperative about the asset division. He offered me joint custody without being asked. Every family law attorney I have spoken to since has told me that what he proposed was generous on paper, generous enough that my attorney at the time saw no reason to push for more. Every other weekend plus Wednesday dinners, major decisions to be made jointly, full access, full communication, full involvement, on paper. What Douglas understood, and what I did not, was that a custody agreement only functions if both parties honor it. And the thing about a man who controls quietly is that he is very good at making violations invisible. A missed visitation can always be explained. A changed schedule can always be justified. And children, small children, who are already hurting and already confused and already looking for someone to blame for the fact that their family has broken open, will believe the story the parent in front of them tells. The first year was difficult, but functional. I had the apartment on Greenway. I had my weekends. I had Wednesday dinners at a pizza place the kids liked, where Lily always ordered the same thing and James always changed his mind 3 times. I wrote them letters in between, real letters, handwritten, because Lily had asked me once if I would, because she liked getting mail, because she said it felt more like I was actually talking to her than a texted. I wrote those letters every week, sometimes twice a week. I addressed them to the house on Maple Ridge Drive, with both their names on the envelope, the way Lily had asked. By month 8, neither of them had mentioned a single letter. I assumed the mail was going astray. I started sending them with delivery confirmation. The confirmations came back as delivered. I asked Douglas carefully whether the kids had received them. He said he thought so, that he would check. He said maybe they were just not big letter writers. He said Lily had mentioned something about homework. He said maybe I should try texting instead. I kept writing the letters, and I kept showing up for the visits, and the visits started being harder, in ways I could not pinpoint. Lily, who had always been talkative, started being quiet in a specific way. The way children are quiet when they have been told something that troubles them and do not know how to ask about it directly. James started crying when I dropped them off, which I was told by Douglas was normal adjustment behavior, which which I believed because what else was I going to believe? By the second year, the visits started to shrink. An event here, a conflict there, a birthday party, a soccer tournament, a friends thing that Douglas said they really wanted to go to, and it would be mean to make them miss it. I tried to reschedule. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it did not. I documented everything in a notebook, dates and times and reasons given, because something in me already suspected that documentation would matter without being able to say why. The first time Lily said it to me directly was at a Wednesday dinner in the third year at a different restaurant because the pizza place had closed. She was 11. She looked at me across the table with an expression I had never seen on her face before, something older than she was, something borrowed from an adult conversation she should not have been part of, and she said quietly, "Why did you stop writing to us?" I set down my fork. "I have never stopped," I said. "I write to you every week." She looked at me the way children look at adults when they are trying to decide if the adult is lying. She did not say anything else. She ordered her food. We talked about school. I drove them home. I sat in the parking lot outside my apartment for 45 minutes before I could go inside. That was the night I hired an attorney. The attorney's name was Marcia Webb, and she had been practicing family law in Knox County for 22 years and had the manner of someone who had heard every version of every story and was not particularly interested in drama, only in facts. I brought her my notebook. I brought her the delivery confirmations. I told her what Lily had said. She was quiet for a moment. "Do you have any of the letters back?" she asked. "Any that were returned?" "No," I said. "They were always confirmed delivered." She made a note. "We need to know where they went after delivery," she said. What followed was 8 months of legal process that I will not describe in full because it is mostly paperwork and waiting and the specific misery of fighting for access to your own children through a system that moves at a pace entirely disconnected from the urgency you feel. What I will say is that Marcia filed a motion for enforcement of the custody agreement and requested a guardian ad litem, which is an attorney appointed to represent the children's interests independently, and that the guardian ad litem, a quiet woman named Susan Hart, spent 3 months talking to Lily and James separately and together, and also talking to their teachers and their school counselor and 2 of their friends' parents. She also, as part of her review, went to the house on Maple Ridge Drive. She called me after that visit on a Tuesday evening. I was sitting in my car in a grocery store parking lot because I had gone to buy food and then just sat there for a while, which was something I did a lot in that period. "I need to ask you something," she said, "and I need you to be honest with me." "Of course," I said. "Were you aware that Douglas had been telling the children you chose not to maintain contact?" I sat very still. "He told them," she said carefully, "that you had moved on, that you had met someone, that your new life was more important to you than they were, that the letters stopped because you had stopped caring, not because anything had happened to them." My hands were on the steering wheel. I was gripping it without realizing. "Where are the letters?" I said. My voice sounded like it was coming from somewhere outside the car. She paused. "We found them in a storage box in the attic," she said. "All of them, bundled by month with rubber bands. 407 letters, Diane. He kept every one. He never gave them a single one." I do not remember the drive home from that parking lot. I have a general sense of traffic lights and the radio being on, but no specific memories, which I think is what happens when the mind receives something it is not structured to process all at once and simply routes around it. 407 letters. Lily was 9 when I started writing them. She was 12 when the legal process finally slowly began to crack Douglas's system open. She was 12 when Susan Hart sat down with her in a neutral office with a box of tissues on the table and explained carefully that there were some things she needed to know about the mail. I was not in that room. I have only Marcia's account of it and Susan's later report and eventually Lily's own words. Lily did not cry immediately. She asked to see them. Susan brought a sample, 6 letters, different months, different years. Lily read them one by one without speaking. Then she asked if she could keep them. Susan said yes. Then Lily cried quietly for a long time and asked one question. "Does she know I didn't get them?" "Yes," Susan said. "She knows." The custody modification process took another 4 months. Douglas's attorney argued that the letters were irrelevant to the existing arrangement, that they did not constitute interference with custody, that there was no law specifically requiring a parent to deliver the other parent's mail. Marcia disagreed in writing in detail over 37 pages. The judge, a man named Gerald Park, who had been on the family court bench for 16 years, reviewed Susan Hart's report in full, and in his ruling used the phrase deliberate and sustained interference with a parent-child relationship, which Marcia later told me was unusually strong language for a family court ruling and was the kind of language that tended to follow a judge in subsequent cases. Douglas lost primary custody. I was awarded residential placement. He received every other weekend and Wednesday dinners. The irony of that particular symmetry was not lost on either of us. What happened next was not clean or simple or cinematic. Real repair never is. Lily came to live with me at 12, already formed in ways I had not been part of forming, with opinions and habits and inside references I did not know, and a specific wariness that I recognized because it was a reasonable response to being told for 3 years that someone had stopped loving you. We had to rebuild something that had never had the chance to fully exist in the first place, which is a different thing than rebuilding something broken, and in some ways harder. James took longer. He was 10 when he came, and he was angry in the way 10-year-old boys are angry, without the vocabulary for it, channeled sideways into slammed doors and refusals and the occasional explosion that neither of us knew what to do with. I took him to a therapist. I took myself to a therapist. We ate dinner together every night, even when it was quiet, even when neither of us had anything to say, because the therapist told me that presence was the thing, that consistency was the thing, that showing up the same way every day for as long as it took was the only answer that actually worked. I kept writing letters. This time, I handed them over directly. Sometimes Lily read them at the kitchen table while I made coffee. Sometimes she put them in a box in her room. She showed me the box once, all the letters from both periods, the ones she had finally received and the ones that had been returned to her from the attic. She had organized them chronologically. She had read all 407 of the original ones, she told me, over the course of a summer. It took me a while to get through them, she said. Some of them were hard. I know, I said. I'm sorry. She shook her head. You were there the whole time, she said. I just didn't know. That is the thing I come back to. I was there the whole time. Every week, 48 weeks a year for more than 8 years, I sat down and wrote to my children about my day, about something funny I had seen, about a memory of them I was holding, about what I was hoping for them, about how I was thinking of them in the small daily moments that do not make it into official visits or structured time. I wrote about the smell of pine needles and a song I heard, and the way James used to pronounce spaghetti when he was 4. I wrote the way you write to someone when you love them and they are far away, and you want them to know that the distance is not your choice. They never got a single one. And Douglas kept everyone. I have thought about this many times, the keeping of them. He could have thrown them away. He could have shredded them. The fact that he kept them, organized by month, bundled with rubber bands, says something about him that I have turned over and over without ever arriving at a conclusion that fully satisfies me. Maybe it was control, the keeping of evidence he could manage. Maybe it was something else, something I do not have the right word for. I stopped trying to understand it eventually. Some things are not puzzles to be solved. They are simply facts to be lived with. Lily was accepted to the University of Tennessee at 17. She studied education, which surprised me, though it probably should not have. She was always the kind of person who explained things carefully, who noticed when someone did not understand and changed her approach without being asked. She would be a good teacher. She already was. She called me the week before graduation to tell me she had been selected as valedictorian. I cried, which embarrassed both of us for a moment, and then she laughed, which broke it, and we talked for an hour about nothing in particular, the way we had learned to talk over the years, easily, without weight. She did not tell me what her speech was going to be about. I sat in the 4th row at Thompson Bowling Arena on a Saturday morning in May, next to my mother, who was 71 and had driven 6 hours from Charlotte and who had cried continuously since we parked the car. The arena was full, thousands of families, the good noise of something being celebrated. I watched Lily walk across the stage to collect her degree and felt a specific pride that does not have a clean name, the kind that is mixed with grief and gratitude and the awareness of time. Then the speeches began, and Lily walked to the podium and adjusted the microphone and looked out at the crowd for a moment, and then she looked directly at me. There is something I want to tell you, she said, not into the microphone quite yet. Then she adjusted, cleared her throat, and began. I was raised, she said, for several years, believing a story that was not true. I was told that my mother had chosen a new life over my brother and me. I was told that the silence from her was a choice. I was told that love, when it runs out quietly, that it stops writing and stops calling and eventually just stops. I believed that story for 3 years. It changed how I understood myself. It changed how I understood what I was worth to the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. The arena had gone very still. When I was 12, she continued, voice steady. A woman named Susan sat down with me in a small room and put 6 letters on the table. They were in my mother's handwriting. The dates on them were from a period when I had believed she had stopped writing, when I had believed she had stopped caring. I could feel my mother's hand find mine in the seat beside me. There were 400 letters, Lily said. 407, actually. Written every week for years, covering everything from grocery lists to Christmas mornings to the way she still thought about the way I laughed when I was small. She wrote through holidays and seasons and my first day of middle school and 100 ordinary Tuesdays. She wrote without knowing if anything was getting through. She wrote anyway. She paused, and for a moment the silence in that arena was the loudest thing I had ever heard. I wanted to say something to my mother, she said, and her eyes found me in the 4th row and stayed there. I have been preparing this speech for 4 months, and I have rewritten this part many times, and I still do not have the right words, so I am going to use the plainest ones I have. She looked at me, directly at me, in my 4th row seat, in front of 4,000 people. You were there the whole time, she said. I know that now, and I'm sorry it took me so long to say so. The arena was completely quiet for 1 full second, then it was not quiet at all. My mother was crying beside me. I was crying, which I had been trying not to do since Lily walked to the podium, and had failed at entirely. People around us who did not know us were crying, which is the thing about truth spoken plainly into a microphone in a large room. It does not require context to land. I do not remember applauding. I think I did. I remember that the sound was very large, and that it went on for a long time, and that Lily stood at the podium through all of it with her chin up and her hands loose at her sides, the way she had learned to stand over years, in a life that had required her to be steadier than she should have had to be. After the ceremony, in the lobby, with the crowd moving around us in every direction, she found me and we stood together for a moment without saying anything. Then she hugged me, and I held on, and we stayed like that for longer than is probably typical for a college graduation lobby, and I did not care at all. Douglas was not at the graduation. He had not been invited. The relationship between him and Lily had been, since she was 12, a thing she managed on her own terms, with the careful distance of someone who had been told a story, discovered the truth, and chosen to carry both without being destroyed by either. She was not angry in the volcanic way, not anymore. She had done her work in therapy and out of it, and what she had arrived at was something more like clear-eyed resignation, the understanding that some people are what they are, and the decision about how much space to give that is yours to make. James had come around more slowly. He was 20 now, studying mechanical engineering at a school in Georgia, quiet and precise in the way he had always been, and more himself than he had been at 10 and 12 and 15, when the anger had nowhere to go. He had read the letters the previous summer, all of them, working through them in a sequence he did not explain to me, leaving me texts occasionally that said things like, "I didn't know about this one," or "the one from December when I was 7, I remember that week." He had not said much directly. He did not need to. The texts were enough. They were, in their way, the answer to all 400 of them. I have not rebuilt my life dramatically. I did not move to a new city, or start a new career, or fall in love with someone who healed me cinematically. What I did was smaller and more durable. I kept my apartment on Greenway, which I eventually bought. I returned to the accounting work I had let shrink during the custody years, and rebuilt it into something stable. I planted a garden in the small yard behind the building, which is mostly herbs and tomatoes, and one rosebush that refuses to behave, but that I have kept anyway because it has survived 3 Tennessee winters, and I respect that. I still write letters. Not every week anymore, because Lily and James are adults now, and we have phones and we use them, and it is different and fine. But on birthdays, on the first day of a new year, on ordinary days when something happens that I think one of them would want to know about and a letter feels like the right shape for it, I address them to their apartments now. I know the mail arrives. The thing about 400 letters that were never received is that they were not wasted. I did not know that when I was writing them. I thought I was writing into silence, which is one of the lonelier things I have ever done. But they were received eventually all at once by a 12-year-old girl sitting in a small room with a box of tissues, and a woman named Susan who understood that the truth, even when it is late, even when it is complicated, is better than the alternative. And they were received by a 22-year-old woman standing at a podium in a cap and gown in Thompson Bowling Arena, who read them all in a summer and then stood in front of 4,000 people and said what they meant to her in the plainest words she had. Lily teaches 4th grade now at an elementary school 20 minutes from my apartment. She calls me on Sundays. Sometimes she stops by on Wednesdays with takeout from a place she likes. Last month she brought a stack of her students' drawings to show me, crayon portraits of their families, the kind that are more feeling than likeness, and she spread them out on my kitchen table and told me about each kid, their names, the things that made them funny, the things that made them hard, with the careful attentiveness of someone who understands, from the inside, how much it matters to be seen. She is a very good teacher. I knew she would be.